Okay, so we had all our presentations, a lot of interesting questions and discussions in between as well. I would like now to open the floor to all kinds of questions and comments for the entire seminar. We still have a bit of time until the official end, so feel free, anything that you have in mind. I think Zhengdu has brought us back to the importance of the epidemiological data and importance of developing rather quicker interventions, medical interventions in combination with digital means. Yes, Heino, please, you have a question.
Thank you very much, Zhengdu, for your very impressive and comprehensive lecture. I've got one question. What we heard from you is that you're, let's say, experimenting with a lot of interventions like laughing gas or the computerized systems. But just one question before. We've heard from Volker and also from Bernd that NPS use is often being done because of not fearing to be detected. And when I see you, let's say people come from compulsory treatment, and then in the next 3 years they are forced to give urine testing and so on. So isn't this mechanism, isn't that, let's say, a threat for the future? Because people, I fully understand, want to hide once they take any other drug within these 3 years, they want to hide their usage. And if NPS is not detectable in the urine test, and if they do not have to fear to go back to the compulsory treatment facility, then I think there's a great future for NPS in China. What do you think about that?
Yes, in China, the urine test only focuses on the heroin and mass use. So for NPS, we could not detect. So, but in China, NPS is not popular used. Just a few cases. Most of the use mass.
Let me.
The urine test is sensitive for methamphetamine.
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe add some remarks because it was very interesting for me also when I lived and worked in China, 2006, 2008, to realize the very, very impressive development of new ideas, new methods to deal with, introducing methadone treatment at that time. And now we have more than 700 sites, at that time only 8. And also with psychosocial support and psychotherapy, which was implemented especially in Shanghai Mental Health Center and at Yoyo Center. And it was very interesting that you organize these trainings for the professionals in this field. And when I was participating at one training with psychotherapists from the United States, it was very interesting to realize that 60% of the participants.
Sorry, I will mute. Just a second. Okay, wait. Okay.
Yeah, it was very interesting to realize that 60% of the participants were police officers because in the compulsory treatment centers, but they wanted to learn new methods because they realized that their former type of treatment, moral education, to say people what you're doing is morally not good, didn't function. So they were very interesting to learn new methods of psychotherapy. That was one very interesting development which I saw. The other one is now the very quick development of your mixture of methods. You are using new technologies, and we have to discuss this anyway also in European countries and in Germany. For example, one of your PhD candidates will work on the system of robot-assisted
Yes.
treatment. And
Tianzhen.
for us, it's very, very interesting on one hand, and very, very, to say, new, very new methods.
Yes.
And we have to discuss this. Are these medical and technical instruments you are using for treatment really effective? What can we learn from your experiences? And concerning new psychoactive substances, we have also to understand the psychosocial support and social cultural background of China. For example, I have been in that time in Shanghai, but also in Hong Kong, in Shangjiang, and there had been a new study of party people who are going to parties. And in Western countries, as the United States or Germany, these people using NPS or ecstasy or other substances. But in China, they're using ketamine. And ketamine is totally different, how to say, effects than the opposite of using ATS. And I was really wondering, why do these people in China want to use ketamine in Germany or in United States or in European countries? There are some people using ketamines. Maybe Bernd, you can add your experiences, but as far experience from research, of course. But ketamine, normally the users in European countries don't like. And we have to discuss why substances are differently used in different social background. So far we are interested in your experience, of course, and of course using these new methods in robot-assisted treatment. By the way, Heino, I guess it was a misunderstanding. This laughing gas was not a kind of treatment, but it was a patient who had been using, as far as I understood.
I probably misunderstood.
Yeah.
It's abuse, laughing gas.
Yeah.
May I add something on ketamine?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite prevalent in European party scenes, not in all party scenes, but it came up in the, I think, at around 2000 in British parties scenes, where I heard about some so settings where many people were going, were getting unconscious because of ketamine use. And then in Germany, it started in Berlin, and in Frankfurt, we observed the party scene quite for a long time. And it looks like it has established to some degree since some years the use of ketamine, but only in combination with other drugs, with amphetamine, with ecstasy, sometimes also cocaine. There's even a special term for the combination of cocaine and ketamine, where people call it cakes, like ketamine and cocaine. But I also have no idea why people are using this drug, because it's usually not really uplifting. And but there seems to be some, I don't know, some moment of special intoxication, particularly in combination with other drugs, that seems to be attractive for partygoers.
I think maybe it's cultural difference, maybe.
Maybe we could elaborate on this. Shangdu, what do you think? I think this is also something that maybe Guza Hong could contribute as well. What kind of cultural or sociocultural dimensions would you?
I think maybe social culture, and for example, in China, almost 10 years before, most of them use heroin, but in other countries, heroin is not widely used. So I think maybe in future we can conduct research to investigate why it's different between the East and West, or East and Europe.
Thank you. No, that's great. Do we have any additional comments on this topic? Or we can also ask questions to other presentations as well. If it's okay, I would like to have, I wanted to ask something to Professor Overt in terms of the presence, but maybe Heino could also have a contribution in this discussion, is in terms of how do we, because it's a closed setting, it's a different context for NPS use, and we've talked about NPS use on online drug markets and how that sort of affects the communication in terms of harm reduction or drug checking. And I just, for me, it's just interesting to understand how would you set differently, or how would you describe the difference of prison context in terms of other context of NPS use, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, generally, one point I already made in the presentation is, of course, that you have well, a lot of drug testing in this context. So people try to avoid to get caught when they use drugs, and that's a major motivation to switch to NPS use. I guess that's really the main reason, because many of the prisoners said outside the prison they would not even think about taking these drugs, because they really, well, also experience sometimes bad effects of these drugs, because they are not only more dangerous than cannabis, if you look at the synthetic cannabinoids, but they also can have very unpleasant effects if you don't get the right dose. So I think that's really the major driver why you find these drugs in closed settings where you have drug screening in place.
If I may add, I think it's a prototype for NPS usage, because what Volker pointed out, people are fearing once they are in an opiate substitution treatment or medication-assisted treatment, they fear to be detected and being kicked out of that treatment. That's one. Second, definitely is that it is easy to smuggle, and it's hard to detect. And people, of course, want to have drugs in prison. That's quite a normal phenomenon, because that is a very exacerbating situation, and people, in their terms, they want to steal a day from the sentence they are having. That's so the usual cultural thinking, stealing a day. Yeah, but I'm completely in line with what Volker said. We are mostly facing elder and very experienced drug users in prison. And those are, let's say, not, let's say, that vulnerable to these substances. They are quite experienced anyway already. And I think it's the classical way of a surrogate, which is in the clandestine way, the maximum taken out of a minimum in prison. And you get a maximum effect for a minimum risk. And that characterizes the prison situation, of course. And that's the reason why. But I fully can understand what we finally got as a result. It has been a hype, of course, also, and it's declining in many ways. But prison will always, or prisoners will always try to, let's say, to get, in a very innovative way, try to get drugs into the system in order to sedate or to stimulate themselves. They will always try to do that. And it's not that, it's very common. When I was working in prison, people were having a coffee bomb. That was that they were putting coffee together with a maximum load of coffee. And once you got it, as well as a tea bomb also, as long as you drank it, only 1 or 2 cups, you feel really a bit dizzy. And they are experimenting all the day. And it's quite a natural process once you put people behind bars, that they try to escape psychologically, or much more psychologically than in nature, but that's the usual way.
Any other comments or questions?
May I ask Professor Stover, you said now about prison, and it was very interesting presentation about also about prison. It was interesting for me because I mentioned in our last meeting that I need to go to prison. You said it's quite normally that people who prisoners that they using drugs in prison. It's common sense, and how he for example, because it was study what prison did, let's say, with such results, and how is they open to do something with this let's say impact of this research? Because, for example, because I did association with my country, for example, how we could come and ask, do we can we, for example, check urine test or for example such test in our system? But anyway, it could be very also useful study and experience for us to develop, for example, this psychosocial support also in prison. And you said it's normally, it means that it's taking place and still in the life that just we can see and observe such, for example, things without this test of urine, or how it was in the study.
Yes, thank you very much, Dinara. Yeah, as I said, or others than me, like Ervin Goffman, he was studying total institution, and he's the father of this term. Total institution means that, let's say, after 5, a completely new life arises in prison. Not only in prison, but in all total institutions, like psychiatric institutions or drug therapy institutions. So when the bulk of staff has gone home, another life arises. And so official staff only gets, let's say, the very extreme phenomenons of overdosage or something. So drug use is quite normal during other time. It's hidden, it's clandestine. It has to be, because otherwise you will be punished. A second punish, a sub-punish, so to say, below the punishment you're in anyway. And in our project, correct me if I'm wrong, Volker, I was quite impressed, that was one part of your question, Dinara, what the social worker did in terms of prevention. And also in our discussion with the prison director, with the governor and other staff members, it was completely clear that there was no way to get a drug-free prison. It was even clear to all the people, it was only the effort to reduce the negative aspects to a certain degree. And I think what the social worker did in terms of prevention with very target group specific material and approaches, at least to me, that sounded very promising. That I didn't want to say you can't do anything about drug use in prison. You can do. And what we can do, and Volker pointed that out already, is to talk in a very normal way about the unintended effects people are aware of, but we have to, let's say, build certain platforms where people can speak confidentially, which is a big issue in prison, where they can speak confidentially about their negative experiences they had, and definitely they have, because it's not predictable, the effects, uncalculable, the degree of purity of the drugs coming in, and many other things. But where are, let's say, confidential platforms? And these platforms can only be generated with NGOs coming from outside, who have who are being trusted, and you can work only, I think, with people from external agencies and not internally, because there's so many mistrust against staff members. You will never know what is telling she or he to the governor or to the doctor or whatever. So far, but that approach, Volker can add some things. That approach was one of the results of our project.
May I add something about drugs in prison? Because it sounded a little bit like, it's as easy as outside a prison to get drugs, but this is definitely not the case, and this is also part of the problem that people face after they get out of prison, because many people are overdosing because they are not used anymore to steady supply of drugs. For instance, also in the course of the NPS prison project, together with Volker, we did a special analysis of our drug scene survey, which we are doing every 2 years here in Frankfurt. So these are people who are, all of them are heavy hard drugs users. 80% of them have been to prison, and those who have been to prison in the last 3 years or something, we asked them in the last survey if they have used drugs, and these were 43%. So less than half of these drug users also use drugs in prison, and the most prevalent drug which was quite surprising, was cannabis. Because cannabis is not very, I mean, you smell it when someone smokes cannabis in prison, so it's quite conspicuous to do so. But there were also some, definitely there were also some hard drugs around, but barely any NPS, which is quite different from other prisons that we studied in this project, where they said, well, NPS is the main problem. So it also depends heavily on where you are and how the supply is generally, what the drug supply situation is like.
I just want to ask, broaden a little bit the perspective out of the prison, because coming back to our to the presentation, especially from Bernd and also from Dan, about the hundreds or more types of these new psychoactive substances, and looking to the role of, how to say, the person working in this field as social workers or as medical doctors. Do we really know what to do? Because first of all, we have to understand all these words and these abbreviations. So it was for me also very difficult to understand all these and the meaning. And to get information, you need to go into the internet to learn from the networks. Otherwise, you don't understand why people are doing this. And for example, also social workers, when I was working in Bremen, we organized a special project for party users, or for those party participants. And it was very difficult to find social workers because the parties are starting at midnight. And most of the social workers are sleeping at midnight. And the age group of social workers was 40 to 50, I think, about. And the only way to get access to these people was to find so-called peers. So those who are going to the parties and are interested to give some more information, better information, and to use their own experiences. And this is very important. We did not discuss much about this peer support, but I guess with NPS, you will not have any access to prevention or to treatment if you don't use peers, those who are experiences these substances. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult. And the second question, again, to our partners in Central Asia and China, coming back to the map from Maria, where it was shown the traffic routes from Afghanistan to Russian Federation. Why has that changed? As far as I know, they are still producing much heroin and opioids in Afghanistan, that cannot be disappearing to nowhere. So what is going on? Why are we have learned that many of former opiate users now are using other substances like NPS, but for me it was very difficult to understand why using opiates is decreasing more or less to 80% or whatever. So these two phenomena should be discussed also, not today, but in the future.
Shall we have a discussion around this? Maybe Bernd or Volker would like to answer to the first question. And then, yeah, Heino?
Ask Dan, because in the Netherlands, you have experience with these peer group interventions.
I don't know whether Dan is still in. I mean, we are already, I think, a little bit around the conclusions. What we
sorry,
out...
could you repeat the question, because it's a bit noisy here and I couldn't understand.
Oh, sorry, Dan. Bitte. Go ahead.
Oh, could you repeat the question? Because
no, it was about the peer group interventions in the Netherlands, which is very important to get access to NPS users.
Okay, well, what we do in the Netherlands, we have, it's called Unity. It's a nationwide project that includes people who use drugs, especially people who used drugs but stopped. And so they inform people who use drugs on the risk and so on. So this is my face again. So it's quite effective, although we do not have studies that back that, but it seems to be quite effective in reaching NPS users and to inform them about risks, especially risk and effects.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
See, we have another expert for peer prevention here, Dirk Grimm. He has just switched on his camera. Perhaps you will say
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Bernd. At first, thank you very much for all your presentations. It was really, really interesting. I'm a social worker from Germany and I work in a peer project. So we're visiting parties and electronic dance music events and building up a little stand and trying to inform people there. And we are working with a big peer group. Before COVID-19, we had about 50 peers that are active in our project. Now the party scene was stopped for more than 1 year, so we left some of our volunteers, but okay. But two things I would like to say and one question I would like to ask. To the point of ketamine, we are seeing that ketamine over the last 10 years was rising and getting more used in the party scene in the Western Germany, in the Eastern Germany, at both parts. So ketamine is one thing that I think will guide us in the future as a normal drug. We get the new law on the 26th of this month in Germany, where our ketamine is put under law in the NPS about the arylhexylamide. And okay, so much to the ketamine. And now I have one question. In Germany, in Switzerland, and in Austria, we see that there's many CBD weed, so cannabis CBD weed, that is sprayed with synthetic cannabinoids. We know it from the police that there were big putaways from the market with more than 150 kilograms that was sprayed with synthetic cannabinoids. Is there planned to be any research on this topic maybe? Because I see there a lot of harm for cannabis users. They think they smoke natural cannabis, but now they get sold cannabis that's sprayed with synthetic cannabinoids. Is there any plan maybe to make a research about this topic? Because in my feeling and from all my surroundings, I see this problem is rising. In Germany, we have now more than 100 examples from the laboratory that say, yes, this cannabis was treated with synthetic cannabinoids. And there I see a lot of harm potential for the users, even for the young users, because often they don't know. There is some research planned? Thank you very much.
Maybe if I may add to this, in the Netherlands, we have been warning last year and also early this year about about cannabis sold both in coffee shops and in the streets that contained synthetic cannabinoid, one specific, MBMD 4EN Pinaca was there. And there were a lot of complaints from users, obviously, because the effects are much stronger and so on. So we have some data, and we will also preparing a scientific paper shortly on what happens. It actually doesn't really happen only in Germany or in the Netherlands, but also in Switzerland and in Spain and Luxembourg. So it's a European-wide issue at the moment. So I suppose that there will be done a lot of research in all these countries that have this problem.
I think this could also be a question for Volker, because he is analyzing a lot of this stuff.
Yes, of course, we are not really doing research on this topic, but we have the samples. So from time to time, we get, unknown samples, which we analyze, and often these unknown samples in the last months and maybe even years now were found to be CBD cannabis, actually with very low THC content, and they were laced with synthetic cannabinoids. And what we also find is that many, usual or habitual cannabis users have synthetic cannabinoids on board without even knowing. So they buy marijuana on the market, and what they get actually is CBD cannabis laced with synthetic cannabinoids. So that is really now a common finding in more or less excessive cannabis users, that they do have synthetic cannabinoids on board without knowing. So, but that's more or less anecdotal. So we don't really have research on that going on. Of course, that's also difficult because, drug checking is not a topic in Germany at the moment. Politically, it is not really wanted. That's the impression of the last years. And what we would need is something like drug checking, because then we could have a view on how big the issue really is. So at the moment, we just can tell, lots of this material are coming in. We had seizures of 50 kilos several times from the Swiss border in the last months. And that was all CBD cannabis laced with synthetic cannabinoids. So there's really big amounts of this material produced and also sold as real cannabis. So that's what we know at the moment. But the size of the problem at the moment is not really known.
Thank you very much.
Perhaps I can add a little bit because a colleague, Carsten Tögel-Lindsey, also received samples from conspicuous cannabis, and I think he had something like 300 now, and about 1/3 of this really contained synthetic cannabinoids. So it looks like, I mean, there is a problem, but there are actually more people that are concerned with this suspicion than really synthetic cannabinoids are detected. So it doesn't seem to be so very big, different from what one dealer in a Vice video said, who claimed that 80% of the cannabis on the market should be laced with synthetic cannabinoids. I think this is massively overstated, but actually it is a problem.
Yes, I agree completely with you, Bernd. The dealer from this reputation about 80%, I don't think so. But now we have 379 measures and 108 were positive on synthetic cannabinoids. And we see it from the map from Germany that it's a problem from all places in Germany, from west to the east, from south to the west, from the border to Holland, to Berlin, to Hamburg, to Munich, the city where I live. And we know from the drug checking projects in the Switzerland and in Austria then that it is more than 2 years. Every week I get more than 2, 3 till 5 warnings that there was tested cannabis that is sprayed or pimped with synthetic cannabinoids. And I think one major problem here in Germany is that most people don't know that there is even an opportunity to test this cannabis. That's only knows a very, very few people. And so it's really hard to see how big this problem really is. And that's the reason why I'm asking for the research or for a monitoring project or stuff like that, because I think that will, me in the social field, affect for the next years. Thank you and goodbye.
May I have a short comment? Hello, Dirk. As I see you now in the picture, because he is working in a program of the federal health, how's it called? Ministry of Health, in where I have been working, and he has been working on a special project for methamphetamine users, which had been a problem in certain parts of Germany. So I would like to bring you together with our colleagues in China, because in Shanghai, they have also a big problem with methamphetamine users. And maybe you can exchange your experiences with Jiangdu and others there. That would be very great, I guess. I will send me, please, your email contact, and then I will bring you together.
It would be a pleasure. I would be very happy to get an exchange, and if we can stay in contact. Is it okay if I place my email address in the chat? So
if you don't mind, yes, we can do. Or
I'm happy from contacts all over the world, and we all can learn from each other. So thank you very much for this contact, and thank you for this day. It was very interesting.
Thank you for this discussion. I wanted to also read a few comments from the chat. Our colleague from Kyrgyzstan, Bakirova Zhildis, has written that she appreciates all the discussions, that it's a good platform to get information about the consumption of NPS. And she added that in Kyrgyzstan, consumption is not yet high, but we must be prepared for the fact that there may be an increase. So far, we have prepared clinical protocols for children. We're currently preparing a clinical protocol for adults. And we get people in a state very similar to psychotic disorders like delirium. Thank you, Zhildis, for this comment. Daniela Yamin has left the meeting a bit earlier because she has another conflicting appointment. Maria Podolskaya also has written that for natural cannabis with synthetic cannabinoids, it's an actual issue for Kazakhstan as well. And another comment from Daniela Ferlana from Italy, she says that drug checking is forbidden here in Italy too. Patients say, don't change your usual pusher because you may get a fake, just like CBD weed sprayed with synthetic cannabinoids. And most of all, chronic users more and more grow their own plants, even if it's forbidden here, just because of that. So that's a bit of an overview also from people who weren't able to participate acoustically with us. So I saw Heino's comment as well, and would like to suggest that we slowly wrap up. If there is anything else, feel free to say. Otherwise, I would like to really thank all of our presenters. Heino, would you like to say maybe a few words, closing words?
Yeah, a few closing words. To me, in the whole morning, it became very clear that NPS is a surrogate, non-detectable, hardly detectable. It's meant as a surrogate, as a substitution for natural drugs, which became too expensive. It's for poor people, for vulnerable, marginalized people. That's completely clear. It has to do, of course, with the criminalization and the prohibitionist perspective in all the countries we're living in. I think the fact what Dan reported, that NPS hardly play a role in the Netherlands, where cannabis products are more or less legally available to a huge extent. That points out that, and we also saw, let's say, countries like Poland, where we have a very restrictive drug policy. The NPS market is quite elaborated. So I think we have, but the sad fact is that we have to live with that in the next future, I guess. These synthetic opioids, cannabinoids, and others do have a future unless we do not change our prohibitionist perspective. Not only, let's say, legal prohibitionists, but also, of course, in people who are in OST, in MAT, who will not be caught in the act with consumption of NPS. They have their good reasons to not do so. Also, people in prison. I found it completely interesting in the end with Dirk Grimm, for instance, and Ilya's question on how, let's say, to come up with a strategy. In earlier times, and I worked with Trimbos, with Franz Trautmann in the 90s, in the years of the 90s, on peer support projects in prisons. I think this is really a promising strategy, which we often forget. We do not elaborate that. I was happy to hear from Daan that Unity in the Netherlands is a national umbrella organization hosting people who are experienced with drug use. In Germany, we have an organization called YES, Junkies, Ex-User, and People in Substitution Treatment. Also very active, but they are not, let's say, very active on the field of NPS, but more or less on opioids, old school a little bit. So I think this is a very promising approach. Correct me, all of you here, if you see other more promising approaches, but that is something I take away from this morning's discussion. Many thanks to all of you inserting your ideas and your strategies.
So it's very difficult to leave you. I don't want to leave you all. And maybe next year we will have also the opportunity to meet in person. In Central Asia, we want to organize some meetings in Central Asia, maybe also this year already in Uzbekistan and then the other countries as well, to exchange our experiences. And that might be a very good chance to meet not only via Zoom, but in person, to discuss this with in more details, with exchanging our experiences. And so very much, again, thank you for your attendance.
Yes, from my side as well, before I pass over to Aysel, many thanks for your very interesting and impressive presentations. I think in these 4.5 very intensive hours, we build a sort of a small network with lots of material in the chat and to come on our website, and lots of interesting insights. I think some contacts have been made here in the chat. So very many thanks from my side as well. It was promising. Also, the way the new format is suitable for these kind of exchange, not so bad. We wouldn't have done it in person. It would have been too expensive and too busy and so on. But thanks all to you, very good. And you will hear from us. We will put everything, the videos, the presentation on our website. We will do the special issue in this journal with all of you as contributors. Yeah, I'm very happy about this morning. Please,
Professor Stover, just for the future, Dinara, just for discussion, probably it would be interesting to discuss one day, is possible, to, for example, through certain cases. For example, in the case of psychosocial support, what the team doing around the client, and to show this through our different countries, because here today a lot of countries and they own have a own experience. For example, even for me as from the social work perspective, interesting to work around the cases, because we're trying to work in the round of case management. For example, to have several cases and then to show, for example, what did, for example, team or the least organization body or some of how to do that. Then could be to collect them, then to show what how different approaches and how the some cases was much more lucky, from whose it was not, for example, who paid a lot, for example, a doctor, social worker, or psychologist, or something. In, for example, just to discuss if it's possible, would be interesting.
Yes. That would be the next step. Thank you very much, Dinara, for reminding me that it's a social work project. And thank you very much. So
because today there was several cases. It was interesting also to learn more finally how it's finished. For example, it could be cases from the prison also for example. Thank you very much for organizing such interesting event. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you also for the last comments, thanking each other. I don't really have anything else to say. I think Heino has wrapped up nicely. So just hope you have a good rest of the day, evening, whatever time your zone is, whatever time zone you're in. And feel free to email us if you would like to get some more information or somebody's email address and so on. Have a nice time. Thank you. Bye.